Today, I would like to offer my greetings to all of the people who are participating in the 24th Kaju Gunshu, all of the Khenpos, Tulkus, Lamas, spiritual friends, and students, as well as everyone listening on the internet. Today is the anniversary of glorious Tuzum Khenpa arising as the Sambhogakaya, or you could say passing into parinirvana. Now, I need not say much, you all know. Tuzum Khenpa was the founder of the Karma Kagyu tradition of teachings, and he was also the first Gyalwang Karmapa and the first bearer of the Black Crown. I don't think that there is much need for me to say much about that, so I will not. If we would like to speak about his life in general, or to speak about his greatness in brief, when Tuzum Khenpa was 20, he went to central Tibet. And the reason why he went to central Tibet was described by Karmapa Mikyo Dorje in a song. Unable to withstand Lord Chopa's fame, he left Kham and Amdo and came to Yu. At that time, in central Tibet, there was a famous teacher of philosophy named Chapa Chike Senge. And Tuzum Khenpa was captivated by his fame, and so he went to central Tibet. When he went to central Tibet, not only did he study with Chapa Chike Senge, he also studied with the famous Kadampa master Shang Sharawa and with Palchen Galo, who was well known in both India and Tibet, along with many other well-known and authoritative lamas. He also studied the Kadampa, Dzogchen path and its result, the 6 yogas of Kala Chakra, Mahamudra, and many other instructions from all Dharma lineages. Tuzum Khenpa traveled to central Tibet twice. On the first time he went there alone, he spent more than a decade listening and contemplating, and over 12 years practicing meditation. And in this way, through his life, he gave an authentic example of the proper level of how to practice listening, contemplating, and meditating, as described in the lines from the Treasure of Abhidharma, with conduct, listening, and contemplation completely trained in meditation. And so I think that this is one particular quality of his example for us. In particular, he also met 7 of Milarepa's disciples, including Lord Gampopa, Rechungpa, Lingkawa Drigam Cham Lenchi Kyepe Dorje, Tsemo Namka Saldrin, and Gensel Puni, and he received the instructions from them completely and without mistake. So it would be fair to say that aside from him, no other Lama of the Dakpo Kagyu met so many of Milarepa's disciples. In particular, he spent 6 years studying with Gampopa and became one of Gampopa's 4 great sons who upheld his lineage. Likewise, Gampopa also made a prophecy to him. Do your practice in Kampo Gamra and Kam, your benefit to beings will spread throughout Udsang and Kam. So as Gampopa prophesied, he went from central Tibet to Kampo Nenan and Kam to practice. And later there, while he was still in Kam, he founded Kampo Nenang, Kamariling, Tropang Cave, Kam Kimen Che, becoming the first to spread the Dakpo Kagyu lineage in Kam. Later he returned to central Tibet for a second time, and when he arrived there, Jigten Sungen invited him to be the head of Dala Gampo Monastery. Now, Jigten Sungun's letter making this request is found in his collected works. It was written in verse, and it has many stanzas. But to give you an example from it, those who uphold the precious Dakpo lineage supplicate you, the Venerable One, Master of the Dala Gampo Monastery, return to your home. Here he is saying that all the masters of the Dakpo Kagyu lineage supplicate you. And for you to come would be the same as for the master of the Dala Gampo to return to his home. And so in this way you could say he was praising Dusum Khyentse highly or showing great respect for him. In brief, there is a lot to say about the greatness, activity, and liberation of Lord Dusum Khyentse, but because of the time, I cannot speak about all of them today. So today I would like to speak about a few of his deeds from his childhood. The reason is that we do not usually hear much about his childhood. And so I thought this would be good to speak about. Now, in order to speak about his deeds as a child, I think we first should speak about the time and place of his birth. Now, to first speak about his birthplace, the old histories of the Kamsam lineage call Dusum Khyentse's birthplace Che Ratak. When we say Che Ratak, the word Che means Cheo. And Cheo can be spelled in a couple different ways. Later it was also called Chehor. These days, it's primarily understood to mean the district of Kardze. There are also different spellings and pronunciations of the name Raktak, Ratak, Ratsak, and so forth. But the majority of Kagyu history say Ratak. These days, the people of Kardze mainly say that Dusum Khyentse's birthplace was in the town of Bochok, or Bangchok. And there are people in that town who say that they're descendants of Dusum Khyentse's family. They also have stories to tell about him, and they have artifacts to show. For these reasons, many historians these days take it as a given that Dusum Khyentse was born in Bochok in Che. So the old histories say that Dusum Khyentse was born in Ratak. But these days, most people say he was born in Bochok. So in order to distinguish which of these two it was, I think that the Vajra Splinter Travelogue by Bhikshu Shankarwa Jigme Ngakki Gyatso, who was a physician and attendant to the 8th Karmapa Mikyo Dorje, is a very good source. The main topic of this text is how, when Mikyo Dorje's reincarnation, Wangchuk Dorje was born in Lower Che near Kawa Langri at Taktsang, or what it's called nowadays as Taktsang Nang. The 5th Shamapa sent a party of 10 bhikshus, all with important positions, including Bhikshu Shankarwa and Gomchen Chuyu Kunga from the Garchen to offer him robes and supplies. So the text describes the events, places, and monasteries, along with the related histories that they saw on their travels beginning in central Tibet until they met the reincarnation in Chewol. In particular, this text gives a very clear descriptions of the places in Upper and Lower Tre, the monasteries at that time, and in particular the facts related to Dusum Khenpa's birthplace. So what it writes in here is that the birthplace of the fourth Shamar was Bumchok, and that the birthplace of Dusum Khenpo was Rangtak in Chewol. And so when we look at this, it's possible that later the birthplaces of Dusum Khenpa and the fourth Shamarpa may have been mistaken for each other or confused for each other. For example, near Ratak there is a stupa called the Ratak Stupa, which is an important stupa associated with Dusum Khenpa. In Bhikshu Shankarwa's travelogue, it is described how this stupa includes Dusum Khenpa's goat skin, his sling, flint, clay pot, and so forth. Now the stupa is not just a stupa, there is also a shrine, a small shrine or a monastery of a sort. And there's a walkway around that shrine, and in that shrine, that walkway, there is a footstep of Dusum Khenpa, as well as a print from his secret Vajra. Moreover, when Dusum Khenpa was learning how to write when he was little, he was playing around on the south side of the river, and he wrote with clear letters on a rock face on the north side of the river. So he was on the south side. He showed light that wrote letters on the north side, on a rock face there. And so there's a very clear letter that he wrote there. And also below that letter, there's also a rock that can be seen by the roadside that has a clear footprint from a boot that Dusum Khenpa was wearing. In any case, the first Karmapa and the ninth Karmapa were both born in Cheo, as well as the fourth Shamar Chenga Judak. And so there are several of the Karmapas and Shamapas who were born there. And not only that, up through the time of the 10th Karmapa Chung Dorje, there were many Kagyu Lamas and monasteries in Treho. Moreover, a student of the 7th Karmapa named Chama Goshri and others spread the Karma Kagyu widely there, both in terms of dharma and politics. But the monasteries were destroyed later by the armies of the Mongolian Khosrow Khan, and from then on, other than the Bengen Monastery, Ridak Monastery, and Gonsar Monastery, only the ruins were left of the other Kamsang monasteries. Because of this, there were fewer people who took any interest in the events related to the Karma Kamsang history. And after many centuries, people began to confuse the earlier and the later Karmapas, and they were unable to distinguish the Karmapas from the Sharmapas, and so I think it is possible that they might have all mixed all the stories into one as they told them. It is also possible that the descendants of Dusum Khenpa's family might have moved from Ratsak to another place. First they lived in Ratsak, and then they moved to another place, Bochok in Tre. So I think this is possible. And so even if they had moved, since it is still the same family line, they could still say that a Karmapa had been born in their family. So for this reason, I think that these are more points that we should continue researching. So that was the topic of Dusum Khenpa's birthplace. And now to speak about his birth date. For the most part, there is no dispute that Dusum Khenpa was born in the Iron Tiger year of the second cycle, or 1110. He was born in the same year as Teshikpa. They were the same age. So if you wonder, well, what day of which month was he born on? The other biographies are not clear about what month and what day he was born on, but there is a treatise on astrology related to the Kalachakra by the 8th Karmapa Mithya Dorje called The Smile and the Leg, the progress of the 4 times in the worlds where the Bhagavan, original Buddha, trod or did not trod. So what this astrology text says is that Palden Dyson Khenpo was born on the 8th day of the Ashvin month of the Iron Tiger year. He passed away at the age of 84 on the 3rd day of the Pushya month of the Water Ox year. So if you take this as a basis, it seems that Dyson Khenpo's birthday was the 8th day of the 9th Tibetan month of the Iron Tiger year. Actually, if tea has been served, then you should drink it. So it is only Mithya Dorje's treatise on the Kalachakra astrology that mentions Dyson Khenpo's birth and date. It is not found in any other biography of Dyson Khenpo. Now to speak a bit about Dyson Khenpo's father and his mother. His father was named Gompa Dorje Gun, and his mother was named Hlato Sa Ganchen Mingden. When he was a child, he was called Gepel, that is, until he was ordained. Now, one difference here is found in the question and answers of Tempo Rabgye, the Vajra master of the 13th Karmapa Doodle Dorje. He gives the name differently, saying, if you don't recognize Tongpan Sherab Gompo, he is Dyson Khenpo's father. But this is an exception. The stories by Dyson Khenpo's direct disciples and other authoritative early biographies all say that Gompa Dorje Gun was Dyson Khenpo's father, not Tongpan Sherab Gompo. Tongpan Sherab Gompo was Dyson Khenpo's paternal grandfather. So he was Dyson Khenpo's grandfather. Dyson Khenpo's grandfather and father were both practitioners of the Nyingma secret mantra. In particular, they both practiced Padamhama Ranan Gyama. So when he was young, Dyson Khenpo said that he studied with the Dharma teachings of Padamhama from both his father and his grandfather. But when we list the lineage of the Karma Kamsa Padamhama practice, only his grandfather is listed, not his father. So when we recite the lineage of Lama, we recite it as Acharya Padmasambhava, Puharpa Shangzhen Dhamma Rinchen, Khyumpodak Shanchen of Latu, Tsang, Gyawa Yeshe of Kyura, Cha Lachin Gompo, and Tongpan Sherab Gompo. We count 6 generations prior to Dyson Khenpo, the last of whom was Dyson Khenpo's grandfather, Tongpan Sherab Gompo. Yes, it's probably fine to say that the Dharma teachings on Ahlama Rangjin Dorje are both the ancestral Dharma of the Karma Kamsan as well as the paternal family lineage of the Karma Kamsan. Now, if you say a little bit about some of the deeds of Dyson Khenpo from his childhood, most life stories of Dyson Khenpo do not really say very much about his childhood. The best summary of what little there is said about it is, I think, the supplication to Lord Dyson Khenpo by the 8th Karmapa Mithya Dorje, which we normally call the Samdrupma. Now the summary that he gives here reads, at 8 you summoned a yaksha, at 11 you stopped a great battle, at 15 you liberated an enemy from the teachings, I bow to you who tamed the hordes of Maras. At 16 you went forth and showed the example of a great monastic. You sustained a temple of the Buddha's teachings, I bow to you who guarded the great wheel of Dharma. There is a commentary on Mikyo Dorji's supplication to Dusum Khyentse written by Karma Khenchen Rinchen Dargye. What this commentary says is that when Mikyo Dorje was born, there were many miraculous signs. And so the news quickly spread among the local people that the son of the tantric master Drumpo Gorje is near Maunakaya. It became very well known. So many people came to see him and ask for blessings. So at that time, Palden Lama made a prophecy to Dusum Khyentse's father and said, if you're unable to keep other people from seeing your son and cannot hide him, then there will be obstacles. And because of this, his father told everyone else, my son died, he just got sick and died, and then he kept it very well concealed. So everyone said, oh, it's certain that Dorje Gun's son has passed away. And they were all convinced that he had died. In any case, Dusum Khyentse grew very quickly as a child. He was very strong, and he was also said to be very tall. In the liberation story of Dusum Khyentse written by his direct disciple Bade Lodro Gyatso, it says, at the age of 6, Dusum Khyentse was taken on a trading trip through the northern regions of Kham. And so he was doing business. He stayed in Lintau, which is in the present-day Gansu province, which is quite far away. And then at the age of 8, he was taken on a trading trip to the south, and they reached the market at Bayan. In any case, as this explains, between the ages of 6 and 8, Dusum Khyentse traveled on trading expeditions to the north and south. Likewise, there's the supplement by the supplication by the 8th Karmapa to Dusum Khyentse. And he also wrote an additive commentary on that, which says, at the age of 8, they traveled to trade in northern regions and became rich. So northern regions, as I said before, is probably the present-day areas of present-day Gansu province. And so they did business there, and by doing the trade, their family became rich. And so I wonder whether Dusum Khyentse having to be taken on trips over such long distances at such a young age might be related to, as Karma Khenpo Rinchen Dargye explained, his father was hiding him because of the prophecy of Palden Lama. Because if you took him for a long way away, then, because in the previous eras, it wasn't like these days. There was no telephones or a way to communicate over long distances as we have today. And so people wouldn't know the situation about where his son or whether he had died or not. So when the 8th Karmapa said in the supplication at 8th Sabunda Yaksha, in his commentary on this prayer, Karma Khenchen Rinchen Dargye writes that when Dusum Khyentse was 8 years old, there was a local monster, an evil yaksha. So there's this monster that Dusum Khyentse actually liberated, Dusum Khyentse actually liberated and transformed its corpse into a boulder. He said that this boulder that the yaksha had been transformed in could still be seen near Dusum Khyentse's birthplace. Likewise, also in the area, sometimes the rain didn't fall. And when that happened, in order to summon the rain, they had the custom of overturning the boulder on the ground and pressing it into the earth. Karma Khenchen Rinchen Dargye said this was told to him by the old Lama Pema Mani from Treho. So this is an old oral history. The next line of the supplication says, at 11 you prevented a great battle. The annotative commentary that's in Mikyo Dorje's collected works only says of this line that he defeated an army that hungered for wealth and meat. So it seems that at the time, an army from another region came to Cheho in order to seize their wealth and meat, and that Dusim Khyentse stopped it. It does not explain the events clearly. But according to Karmye Khenpo Rinchen Daje's commentary, when Dusim Khyentse was 11, there was a large war in his homeland. And the local people asked his father, the tantric master Gompo Dorje Gyun, to stop the war. At that time, his father replied, "I'm too old, and I can't do a wrathful activity. I now have several hundred million recitations of the wisdom data to do, and while I'm doing that, I can't do any wrathful activity. So, son, you are skilled in the activity rituals of the mamas and the yamas, and so you should do the ritual of victory over Yama in battle." So as he was instructed, Dusim Khyentse did the ritual of victory over Yama in battle. He pushed back the army, and the conflict in the valley naturally subsided. When that happened, the local people said, "Oh, the tantric master Gompo's son, who was a Nirmanakaya, must not have died after all. It's just because the tantric master wouldn't do the rituals himself." And so they said, his son probably didn't die. He must have some pretty powerful sorcery. Now, after this, both the biography by Dusim Khyentse's direct disciple Gang Lotsawa entitled The 100 Lives of Dusim Khyentse, and the one written by his attendant Bhikshu Kumara Bodhi, or Gelong Shunu Chanshup in Tibetan, in his Dusim Khyentse's life story in 108 vignettes. And both of these authors are Dusim Khyentse's direct disciples. Both of these relate how Dusim Khyentse met Lama Berotsana and the Indian Siddha Padzin at a young age and received spiritual instructions. And so now here you might wonder, who is this Lama Berotsana? Regarding this, the great Tibetan historian Dungkar Rinpoche wrote in a note in his Red Annals that this is not the translator Berotsana who was a contemporary of the Tibetan king Tristan Densen, but instead a Lama with a similar name from the Kagyu tradition. I have not yet seen his biography. So it is as Dungkar Rinpoche says, the Lama Bero mentioned here was not the great translator Berotsana from the time of the ancient spread of the teachings, nor was he a Tibetan Kagyu Lama. He was probably an Indian Pandit who had traveled around the 11th century to Tibet. His name was Verochana, or Verochana Rakshita. The biographies by Dusim Khyentse's direct disciples refer to him as Lama Bero, or Lama Berotsana. But in Tibet, he was known better by another name, which is Ngulchu Bero, or Mercury Bero. Now, the reason why he's called Ngulchu, or Mercury Bero, is that when he had traveled to China, the emperor gave him a cup of mercury, and mercury is poisonous. If I need to explain it, it's complicated, but in brief, it's poisonous. In any case, the emperor gave him a full cup of mercury, and since he was offered it, he drank it all. He drank the entire cup, but it didn't harm him or his life. And this is why he was called Ngulchu, or Mercury Bero. Now, Ngulchu Bero is very important. The reason why is that the 5-deity Tara, that is one of Dusim Khyentse's 5 sets of 5 deities, was transmitted through this Lama Berotsana. So it is important for us to know something about this Lama, Mercury or Ngulchu Bero. Aside from Dusum Khyentse, Ngultri Bero had many well-known disciples, including Rinpoche Gyatso, the founder of the Tropu Kagyu, Lama Shang, the founder of the Tsalpa lineage, and the Tibetan yogini Machik Shama. In particular, there is a biography of Lama Bero written by Lama Shang, which is the most important source for his life story. When Gyulo Tsawa Shunpal discusses the life of Lama Bero in the Blue Annals, his primary source is the Liberation Story by Lama Shang. Now, there's a lot to say about Lama Bero's life story and about when Dusum Khyentse met Lama Bero, but this is not our topic for today, so I will not speak about it today. In any case, even these days, near Kara and Tesha, there is the retreat cave of Lama Bero. And there's an autobiography of the fifth Dongto Rinpoche, in which he writes that near Kara and Tesha, there's a cave where the great Berotsana stayed in the past when he came to Teshu. And when the translator Berotsana was staying in the cave, he saw a light shining from the plain in Kajak. He went to see what was in the place where the light shone from, and what he saw was that it was an old statue of the Buddha Shakyamuni that had been made during the time of the Dharma King Sonsen Gampo. Lojin Berotsana took the statue and built a temple for it there, showing it great respect. Later, after a fair period of time had passed, a large and early Kagyu monastery called Kata Dojiden was built there. But later, that monastery declined and eventually basically fell into ruin. And then, after another considerable length of time, the statue that had been found by Lojin Berotsana was offered along with Dharma mantras to fill statues, and they were made statues of Cho Shakyamuni, 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara, as well as images of the protectors and so forth. And so they built a shrine for the Choa statues, and next to the shrine there were 108 large tsatsas, or small stupas, large tsatsas, each of which had a bead from Berotsana's mala. And so this is the oral history as it is presented by Dongto Rinpoche. So these days it's commonly said that the beads from the mala in the 108 tsatsas are from the Tibetan transit of Berotsana. However, it's difficult to find reliable accounts of Lojin Berotsana traveling to Cheho. Moreover, the great translator Berotsana and Ngultri Berotsana have exactly the same name, so I think these two might have been confused for each other. They mixed the two up. Basically, in Tibet, when you say Berotsana, everyone assumes you mean the translator Berotsana, and I think that because of this, I think people got a little bit confused. But I don't need to say much about that. At the next line of the supplication to Dusum Khyentse by Mikyo Dorje reads, "At 15 you liberated an enemy of the teachings." The biography by Dusum Khyentse's direct disciple, Lodro Gyatso, describes at how at the age of 13 he accomplished sorcery and defeated some enemies. And after he had defeated the enemies, he was so pleased that he hoisted a flag and blew a conch and made a grand offering and thanksgiving to his protectors. And because of this, he became well known in Taishu for his great powers of sorcery. Not only that, the surviving family, the enemies whom he had killed through sorcery, were terrified, and they came to make great offers to the monastics, and in particular, they came to and gave a large share at a confession to Dusum Khyentpa's family. They made a confession, they promised to be their subjects. And they said that they would follow them. And Dusum Khyentpa accepted their confession. So it describes this. Now what Karma Khenpo writes is that when Dusum Khyentpa turned 15, he accomplished Rangjung Gyalma practice in Lhamo Cave in Taishe, and she actually showed him her form. Now at that time, there was an enemy who was rivaling Dusum Khyentpa and his tantric master father. Dusum cast a spell, and Rangjung Gyalma then liberated the enemy, and then came back with the enemy's lungs and heart. So he says that he has such great powers in sorcery, but other than that, it doesn't say much. But where is the Lhamo Cave in Te that is mentioned here? Lhamo Cave in Te is further up in the valley from his birthplace of Ratak. Bhikshu Shankara writes of this in the Vajra Splinter Travelogue, that on a mountain further up the valley from Ratak, Dusum Khyentpa practiced Padalhamo and saw her face. And after he saw her, she disappeared into the rock face, leaving a self-arisen image of Padalhamo, a naturally arisen image, including her mule. And so because with her mule, when Padalhamo was dissolving into the rock with her mule, then Dusum Khyentpa probably grabbed the tail of the mule and grabbed and pulled it back. And when he did this, the mule's hindquarters remained outside, and so they remained as like a stone relief of the goddess's mule. So there's this self-arisen image of Padalhamo with her mule. When the seventh Karmapa Chuddajasa visited Te, he went to Lhamo Cave, where he also saw Padalhamo's face, and he wrote a praise of her that is included in his collected works. Now, one account that is different from any other is in Mikyo Dorje's annotative commentary on the supplication to Dusum Khyentpa. He writes of this line, "At 15 he liberated an enemy of the teachings that his wife had been taken by someone else, so he did practice in sorcery and took the victory for the jewels." So what this is saying, if we just say it plainly, is that someone else took his bride or his wife. And when she was taken away, then Dusum Khyentpa cast a spell and was victorious. Not only that, in the 8th Karmapa's collected songs, it says, Dusum Khyentpa, emanation of the lion's roar, left his wife and resented his father's family. Now I must go forth, he said, may I remember the faults of the home from my heart. So what this is saying is that Dusum Khyentpa left his wife, and when he left his home, and also that he had a disagreement with his father's siblings. No, it was his father's brothers and sisters. There was a disagreement, and because of this, Dusum Khyentpa felt revulsion for samsara, and thought that he absolutely must go forth and be ordained. Likewise, Guzan Repa writes that Dusum Khyentpa took a wife at the age of 9. And so when we look at all of these, then probably Dusum Khyentpa must have been betrothed as a child, as was the custom in Tibet. That is, when people were betrothed as children, so they weren't actually married, but they were betrothed. And saying, when this child grows up, then you two will get married. And so it's this custom of betrothal, and I think this is what is meant here. In any case, what it means is that Dusum Khyentpa had a bride of some sorts. But as it is often said in the oral history, Dusum Khyentpa had a monkey face. Dusum Khyentpa's face was not so nice looking. It was like a monkey's face. And we know that it was like a monkey's face because at Tsurpa Monastery there was a statue of Dusum Khyentpa that was made after his parinirvana. And the sculptor of this statue was one of his direct disciples. And this sculpture also have a very monkey-like face. So Dusum Khenpa was, how should I say it, was probably not very good looking. His face looked like a monkey's. And so since he had such an ugly face, he was probably left by his bride, or perhaps she was convinced by someone else to go elope. In any case, his bride left him and went off with someone else. And when she left, then Dusum Khenpa was despondent. He was so depressed, and he practiced wrathful mantras, inciting the Dharma protectors. Then when the enemy went out to do something, he fell off from his horse on the road and was dragged along and killed. When Dusum Khenpa heard the news, he was overjoyed. He raised a flag, blew a conch, and raced on a horse. And he said, "I've been victorious," and he made it well known all over the area of Treho. The supplication to Dusum Khenpa continues. At 16, you went forth and showed the example of a great monastic. You sustained a temple of the Buddha's teachings. I bow to you who guarded the great wheel of Dharma. As I was just describing, Dusum Khenpa had perfected the power of wrathful mantra at a young age. He had great power and had killed someone. So he had great sorcery and powers. But he also realized that the karmic ripening would be heavy, and because of other factors, he developed the wish for liberation from samsara. He felt disgust for the home and asked his father's permission, who agreed and gave him permission. So at the age of 16, he went to Kadak Kunchuk Jungne Monastery in Tre, which was a seat of the Kadam lineage at the time. It was an excellent monastery. And there was a lama there named Choki Lama of Trewa, who had taken ordination from Ngok Lepe Shirap, a student of Atisha and the founder of the Sangpo Monastery. He was also the main student of the Tibetan translator Ngok Loden Shirap. So this Lama was the Kempo, and the ritual master was Cha Sangye Drak, and he went forth and was ordained. The name he was given was the monastic name of Chuki Drakpa. So from Dusum Khenpa on, there's been a custom of giving the incarnations of most of the Karmapas the monastic name of Chuki Drakpa. And I think there must be a particular reason for this, because otherwise there would be no need to name them all Chuki Drakpa. In the Vajrasplinter dialogue by Mikyu Dorje's attendant Bhikshu Shankarai, he writes a history of Kadak in verse, and so it's in verse, but I'll relate it in prose to make it easy to understand. He says that the Kadak was a monastery that was built when the Tibetan Emperor Triyalpa gathered all the monastics in the realm of Tibet at the time, which extended from the stupa of the Karchung Pillar in China and to Mount Shinga in Kashmir. And he summoned them all there and built the Dharma Wheel Monastery. And then the emperor himself cut off the locks of hair and spread them on the ground and had the Sangha walk over them, showing the Sangha such great respect and service. Later, because this jewel of the Sangha had walked on the locks of his hair, these locks were also considered sacred and were placed inside a stupa, which the emperor was also said to have circumambulated. So the Kadak stupa contained the hair of Triyalpa Chen. So this is the stupa that was there, and next to it there was a large monastery with a 3-story temple and a turquoise roof that had been built by a student of one of Lume's disciples. So at the time there was a large Sangha there, and it was there that Dusum Khenpa took the lay precepts from Chokoro Chuki Lama. This is what's said there. At the same time, Bhikshu Shankarwa went to Treho. The Kadak monastery was in decline, and the statues and scriptures had all gotten old and were kind of scattered all about. And the monks were basically all the same as lay householders. They didn't really inspire any faith. The lineage at that time was a Sakya, he writes. So even though Bhikshu Shankara only writes a few stanzas on this topic, I think it is an important historical source. In any case, the travelogue by Gelong Shankara that I was just describing says only takes lay precepts, but Dusin Khenpo's direct disciple Ganglo wrote in his biography, The Golden Isle, The Precious Lives of the Lord of Dharma, that at the age of 16 he took the novice vows in Karak with Geshe Choki Lama, whom he served for 2 years. And at that time, he received the empowerment of Chakramvara from Geshe Shora, and he heard teachings on Achala and on the Kadampa tradition. Likewise, in his attendant Bhikshu Kumara Bodhi's life story, it is also described how he went forth at Karak and Te. Not only says that he participated in the Sangha's activities and set up a place there for 2 years. And so when we look at these two biographies by his direct disciples, they both agree that Dusim Khenpo went forth at Chokra Kadrak, so that we can know that. Not only that, he served this monastery of Chokra Kadrak very well, and he established a monastic sangha, as they said. It also says in the annotative commentary on his supplication that he established a monastic sangha at Chokra Kadrak. So this is very similar to what is said by his attendants. So he did his. So not only did Dusim Khenpo go forth at Karak, he also established a large monastic sangha there, which accords with the biography of Bashuna Jumper. He was from an important family. He had engaged in commerce while young and become rich. So because he was an rich and important family, in this way he offered service to Karak Monastery and had a great influence in increasing the size of the sangha there. In any case, when he was being ordained at Karak, according to some biographies, including the Feast for Scholars, when his head was shaved during the ordination, the deities Chakramvara and the wisdom deities came in the sky, placed a black crown on his head, and prophesied that he would be the embodiment of the activity of all the Buddhas, and gave him the name of Karmapa. So that's when he was given this name. This is a pure vision, and it says that both of the masters there saw it. And this is why he would later wear a black hat. So this is what is said in the Feast for Scholars and some other biographies. But I do not think that it is said this so clearly in the biographies by Dusim Khenpo's direct disciples. In any case, Dusim Khenpo spent 2 years at Karak, and during this time he served Khenpo Chogi Lama and also studied the Kadampa teachings of Atisha's tradition. Not only that, as I mentioned before, in central Tibet there were the 3 direct disciples of Atisha's in central Tibet. They were named Rango Gyarge, Golotsa, and Yulchoang. Among them, Yulchoang's direct disciple was Geshe Trawa. And they also had an elder brother, and his older brother was Dorje. And so it was from Dorje that Dusim Khenpo studied the Kadampa teachers. Pausula Trengwa and Kunchen Pemba Karmpa say that Dusim Khenpo studied Dharma directly from Yulchuang. But the biographies by Dusim Khenpo's direct disciples only mention Yulchuang's student Trarawa. They do not mention him studying with Yulchuang himself. Likewise, Dusim Khenpo also had a habit of speaking with the students about the past and future lives of his lamas. And when he spoke about these, he only spoke about Trarawa's past and future lives, but not Yulchuang's. Likewise, it is also generally accepted that Yulchuang was over 50 years old when Atisha came to central Tibet. This is generally accepted. So if Dusim Khenpo had met him during his lifetime, then Yulchuang would have had to be at least 95 years old at the time. So I think it must have been difficult for them to meet. In any case, he did receive from Geshe Trawa many Dharma teachings that were transmitted by Yulchuang, and this topic is described most clearly in the history of the Kadampa by Gyawa Gandudrup students Setan Lechen Gunga Gyaltsen. What it says is that The practice of Hayagriva and the four Shvanas was requested by Nachi Lotsawa and the monk king Yeshe, but Atisha wouldn't give it to them. But he did say to Yul Chuang, "This is Avalokiteshvara. He's a deity of compassion. You have great compassion, so I shall give it to you." And he gave the sadhana of Hayagriva and the four Shvanas to Yul. And so it is because of Yul that the many instructions of Atisha's tradition of Avalokiteshvara were spread widely. They were passed down to the glorious Tsurpupa or Dusum Khenpa. Dusum Khenpa received them from Yul Chuang's student Geshe Trawa and from his brother. And it wasn't just the Hayagriva and the four Shvanas, it was also the Chaksamvara empowerment of Atisha's tradition, many secret mantra sadhanas, and the instructions on Achala. Likewise, there is also the four mandala tradition from Yul's transmission that was also given to Dusum Khenpa. Among Dusum Khenpa's 5 sets of 5 deities is the Hayagriva and the four Shvanas. So many of Atisha's instructions spread from Yul's transmission into Karmapa's lineage, as Lechin Kunga Gyaltsen says. And accordingly, the Hayagriva and the four Shvana teachings included in Dusum Khenpa's 5 sets of 5 deities came from Yul Chuang. And in particular, there was the 4 mandala Tara passed down from Yul Chuang. And this practice probably does not exist in any tradition other than the Karma Kamsang. The reason is that Kato Rinzin Sewan Norbu writes of this in his wish-fulfilling tree, the ritual of supplicating and offering the 4 mandalas to Noble Tara, that some say that there are rituals for requesting one's desires from Tara and that are in the lineages of Padmasambhava, Dampakyakarwa, and Shakirashri, but I have not clearly seen an independent 4 mandala ritual of their lineages. The one that is well known now was transmitted by Lord Atisha to... so the one that we know now is translated from Atisha. And there are 3 different transmissions of this 4 mandala ritual by Atisha. One is in the Sakya tradition, one in the Nartan tradition, and one in the Kamsan tradition. The one in the Kamsan tradition was written by Kacha Wangpo. This is passed down from Atisha's lineage, but it is radically different from the other rituals. He's saying basically that it's completely different than the others. It doesn't, it's not similar to them at all. So it seems that when Kato Rinzin says that some say there are rituals in the lineages of Padmasambhava, Dampakyakarwa, and Shakirashri, the word some refers to the second Shamar, Kacha Wangpo. The reason is because Kacha Wangpo's giver of all desires, the stages of the mandala Bhagavati, clearly says this. However, Kato Rinzin, when he says that he has not seen an independent 4 mandala ritual in their lineages, however, in Tropu's 100 instructions, I've seen instructions on praising and accomplishing Tara by Shakirashri. So I think this must be the ritual and supplication of Tara in Shakirashri's tradition. So you might wonder what makes the 4 mandala Tara of the Kamsan tradition special. So there are 2 different reasons. The first reason is that the structure of the ritual is different, and the second is that the lineage is different. Regarding the structure of the ritual, the self-visualization in the Kamsan tradition is a self-visualization of red Lokeshvara. And in the front visualization, you first visualize white Tara, then red Tara, then green Tara in succession, and you offer the mandala and so forth to each of them. In the end, you visualize red Tara, white Tara, and green Tara all together and make offerings and so forth to them. There are also short, medium, and long prostrations, mandalas, and recitations of the Essence Mantra. And there are also different numbers of repetitions of the 21 homages. It's not necessarily as the 2, 3, and 7 times as in the Nartan tradition, where you take the line that says, repeat it twice, thrice, 7 times, Instead, in the Kamsan tradition, it's not necessary that you recite it first twice and then three times and then 7 times. Now, the reason why the lineage is different is that the colophon from Kachalwampo's ritual says, this ritual of offering to and supplicating the Bhagavati was passed down from Tara herself to Atisha and then to Yulchomang, who passed it to Dusum Khenpa, to Gyalpo Lungpa, then to Gyanasiddhi, Siddhakirti, and Lord Ritripa. So if we take this as the basis, then it would seem that Dusum Khenpa received it directly from Yulchomang. But in any case, the Kamsan tradition of the 5 deity Tara was passed down from Atisha to Yulchomang and then eventually to Dusum Khenpa. Now, the best known Tara ritual is the one from the Nartan tradition, which is found in the 100 Nartan rituals. Now, when you look at the lineage of the 100 Nartan rituals, it was passed down from Atisha to Gumpawa to Kamawa and so forth. Kamawa here means Geshe Kamawa, not the Karmapa. Some people might think that Kamawa was the Karmapa, but they're not. They're different. So in this way, there's a bit of a difference between the Nartan transmission and the Kamsan tradition. However, in the Karmakaji these days, it's rare to find people who know that we have our own special 4-mandala practice of Tara, and that we have our own tradition of pith instructions that has its own distinct, wonderful features. People generally only know the profound essence Tara or the Saptik Tara, and if those who know that there is a Karma Kamsang 4-mandala practice of Tara are more rare than stars in the daytime, the people who actually recite it are like turtle fur, rabbit horns, and the like. So that's what it's like. In any case, we have our own special instructions of our own particular lineage. We have a treasure that we need to cherish it and preserve it. And if we can do so, then only then can we dare show our faces to the lineage masters of the past and dare say that we are upholding their lineage. If instead we ignore our own particular transmissions, and we do not take care of our own treasure and instead only practice other traditions, then of course it's fine to practice other traditions, but first we must take care of our own inheritance. To preserve your own inheritance first, before you go looking elsewhere for jewels, is the way of the wise. So in this way, it's important for all of us to understand how important Dusum Khenpa was for Tibetan Buddhism, and for within the Dakpo Kagyu within that, and especially for the Karma Kamsan lineage. Once we understand this, the most important thing to know when we think about the masters of the past is how to take their examples as spiritual instructions. Merely knowing their life story doesn't help. We need to take their life stories as in spiritual instructions or as an example to follow ourselves. And we need to do as much as we can to become like them ourselves. If we can apply some diligence to this, then only then will knowing the Lama's life story be meaningful. Otherwise, there won't be much difference between the Lama's life stories and stories about ordinary worldly people. That is all I have to say for today.